Hello, and welcome to Stream Theory. My name is Jackson from the YouTube channel Skip Intro. And on the other line, on the other coast, we have Thomas Flight of the YouTube channel Thomas Flight. How's it going, Thomas?
I think you're on the other coast because I stayed where I was and you moved. So I'm on the original coast and you're on the other coast.
The original is a point of perspective. How far back do you want to go? Where did Pangea break apart? Maybe this was the first coast. I don't know.
Who's to say? It's all relative anyway.
I bet some geologist could tell us.
What does coast even mean in the grand scheme of things?
This we're going to be talking about Twin Peaks: The Return, and this is a very important existential framing for everything. Because I'm watching it for the first time. Thomas is watching it for the second time.
Yes. Yeah.
I finally finished Twin Peaks, and then so that I could watch The Return, and then I immediately watched the movie, and I jumped into the Return about halfway through, so we're going to talk about that. Thomas is really excited to talk about it.
I'm very excited about this.
But before we get into it, today, this is like the resurrection of Stream Theory,
yes,
which was our podcast about the streaming wars, and we thought that it was only appropriate since yesterday, when we're recording this on Tuesday. Yesterday, AT&T announced that they were going to be getting rid of their position in WarnerMedia, and we're going to be spinning it out into Discovery. AT&T bought WarnerMedia, which was always going to be kind of a weird partnership because AT&T is a phone company, and WarnerMedia is not. And apparently, there's been like a bit of friction. From what I've heard from, I know a couple people I know someone who writes for a show on HBO Max. And
Warner Brothers, or WarnerMedia for people who don't know, is basically HBO Max.
HBO Max and all of the Warner Brothers movies and anything that's on HBO Max. Also, I think TNT and TBS.
There's a few things that don't end up on the HBO Max streaming service, but most of all of that stuff is part of WarnerMedia.
If you're interested in sports, TNT and Time Warner has a deal with the NBA and some sports stuff, but it's not really our angle here. But the I guess they kind of spent a lot of money. This was a giant merger, and then they launched HBO Max back in a couple months ago, and now they're basically like, we're done. And HBO Max is going to be joined with Discovery, which is like the Food Network, and much more like traditional, like home HGTV, some stuff like that. And so it's kind of a crazy pivot, and it looks like a bunch of the HBO Max, HBO like higher ups are going to be planning their exit, I guess, was something I heard, like the CEO. Who knows what this will mean? I guess one of the things that HBO Max didn't have, it's definitely been lagging behind the other, Netflix and Disney Plus in terms of raw subscribers. I think by itself, they said that they only have like 20 million subscribers, which sounds like a lot, but it's not anywhere compared to Netflix or Disney. Especially not when you include Hulu in the Disney calculation, since they own that.
And I'm sure they were hoping for a lot more with the move to release the Warner Brothers films, a lot of the Warner Brothers films, because they are probably taking a big financial hit in theoretically like doing that.
Probably not this year because of the pandemic, but after that, although it's hard to say because the HBO Max numbers don't necessarily include the people who get HBO through their cable subscription.
Right.
Or some people get it through their Hulu or whatever else. So the numbers on there are iffy, but the point is they were kind of, they had like a little rough start, I would say, HBO Max, and they've kind of started to develop this brand identity with the movies coming out same day. And obviously they always have the HBO catalog, but what they never really had was what I've heard called nightlight TV, which is the idea that you just kind of turn it on. It's in the background. Maybe it's something you fall asleep to.
Yeah.
Netflix hasn't necessarily put out any like prestige TV shows that we are really excited about recently, but
They have plenty of
The
nightlight.
Office. They got plenty of nightlight TV. Disney does too. And the only thing HBO Max really had was Friends, which now, with this merger with Discovery, theoretically it should exponentially increase.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess the main thing is we're seeing this consolidation of more and more TV into less and less buckets. We've got Disney, we've got Amazon, we've got Netflix, and now HBO has merged with a bunch of terrestrial media, and now there's also rumors that NBC Universal is maybe going to buy Viacom, or something like that. So all that to say, yeah, that's all that to say.
Is this really, I mean, this is just speculation, but like, do you think this is maybe pretty bad news for HBO in terms of content? Kind of like the brand of like this, HBO puts out a show, it's good. That's the brand. I guess it's like prestige TV. HBO has a prestige TV brand.
Right. They're like the culture
already,
makers, right?
It's already kind of been happening where like I feel with HBO Max, now it's a platform. It's not a prestige TV brand necessarily.
I think the point of buying an HBO is to acquire that brand and not necessarily to like dilute it. I don't know if they will, but I mean, they're still making shows that people are excited about. I mean, like the best show on TV was Succession, and it's just hard to remember because it took because the pandemic messed up its production schedule. But I mean, they still are. And right before that, Succession's like the follow up to Game of Thrones, which was like obviously a cultural juggernaut, and Euphoria has been pretty exciting, and I know people are excited about that. So I don't know. I'm not too concerned about that, but I know that there are definitely people who are. And I think the bigger story here is that, what looked like last year when we started Stream Theory was like a bunch of different streaming services. It's only like a year later, and we can already see them like consolidating and kind of becoming back to the original TV model of like the big three.
Breaking news, Quibi originals are now available on Roku TV, so that's more consolidation.
That is the merger of the two most irrelevant things I've ever heard. Not that like Roku isn't irrelevant, but the idea that they're going to get into like original content is
well, and they're doing that by buying out the Quibi library. Like,
how much do you think it costs to buy out the Quibi library?
I don't know. I hope they got a deal because
it's like $6 million.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was like $1 billion investment, right?
Billion, on like content or something.
Jeez,
like that.
I don't know.
Oh man,
it's the
consolidation. The consolidation thing. It's like I have two perspectives about it. One is that in one sense, it's kind of nice for consumers because you don't want to have to like have 12 streaming services if you want access to everything. You want maybe like 3. As if you're a normal person. Like if you're us, you have as many as you want because it's your job. But like most normal people probably only want to have like 2, maybe 3 different apps that they like go to watch TV. So like in a sense, the consolidation helps with that, and that's kind of nice. But it's bad in terms of like less, more monopolistic power. And sometimes this stuff can just be bad in terms of how these companies are run. Probably a lot of people will get laid off. That's another thing that I was seeing. There will probably be a lot
bad. Yeah. Anytime there's one of these big mergers, people get laid off.
And that's one of the big reasons they do it, is because they can kind of identify what they call synergy or overlap and then fire a bunch of people and get, because the idea is like, oh, these people are doing the same job, so we can get rid of, half of them or whatever. So that's bad.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it plays out.
I think what people are more concerned about is the idea that this TV revolution that happened in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, the 2010s, of a bunch of these kind of mid budget like prestige shows. There were shows on FX, there were shows on AMC, HBO, the four major networks, of course, and so on and so on and so on. That was kind of enabled by this like open market, I guess, of so many different players. Like Breaking Bad and Mad Men were famously like passed on by a bunch of different networks, and then they make AMC, and that's really cool. And maybe if there's more consolidation, you get less of that.
Yeah.
Which would be sad. Mm-hmm. But also, there's so much TV. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Me too. I don't think anybody really expected like, oh, there's going to be 12 big streaming services. It's like, it's just not gonna.
No.
Yeah. Some of them have to die. Some
Sorry,
have to be
Peacock.
sacrificed on the altar of capitalism. So
Peacock, you're next.
Yeah. Tell me about what's going on with Netflix.
So Netflix announced that they like sent this letter out, this email. I'm not sure if it was like leaked or what, but they kind of put out feelers on this thing called N+, which is you gotta put a plus on it if you want to be in the streaming wars.
Did you send me that?
I sent you that, yeah.
Journalist had a take where it was like plus is just like the worst name for anything.
Oh, I didn't send you that, but that's true.
I saw somebody saying that. Sorry to whoever that. Well, I mean, it's not an original thought to think that it's bad.
The only thing worse than plus is max, and
it means nothing, especially when everybody uses it. It's like.
Yeah,
it just doesn't mean any. So anyways,
N plus is this like
N plus. Sorry, not Netflix plus.
Yeah, it's unclear exactly what it is, but the idea is basically that they want to create extra. I want to say extracurricular, but that's not what it is. It's like content outside of the show. So you know how you listen to like a podcast about a TV show, or you want to see the AMC was really good at this in the peak of like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, Walking Dead. They'd have Talking Dead and Talking Bad. I don't know what it was, but it was always Talking something. And they would have like these after shows where they would bring on the cast and they would talk about the show. And sometimes it was pretty interesting. And it's kind of like the HBO featurettes that are at the end of a lot of episodes of shows on there. And they kind of want to create a platform that is more of a social media platform that would theoretically exist within the Netflix app because they're all about one place. And so this is kind of big news, although I'm not sure how big it is. I remember when we first started this podcast, we talked about how the Netflix had released like this interactive timeline for The Witcher, which was a thing, and like it seems like that was kind of like a foray into this. Basically, they want to consolidate everything, which makes sense.
They already do a lot of supplementary content, and some of it goes on to Netflix itself. Like you have behind the scenes stuff for The Irishman or the Queen's Gambit or whatever. There's stuff like that, or like if you watch The Circle, there's like a follow up. After party type thing. That's like a separate episode
for all those circle heads.
Yeah, for all those circle heads out there. But so they have stuff like this, and then there's also content that they obviously create that goes on like YouTube or something that's a part of their marketing efforts or whatever. But you can, so it's like supplementary.
Like in the past,
you've
made some video essays for Netflix.
I've made video essays for them, but also stuff that was obviously like shot as part of the production or something, or an interview or a featurette, like making a featurette or something. But they just put it on YouTube. It's not actually on, or they're just using it as promotional material on social media. So it would kind of make sense to like consolidate that stuff into something or like a place that would be easier to find. But yeah, N Plus is definitely a terrible name. And
They were getting they were getting a lot of crap, but I think like everything with Netflix, it's gonna be pretty popular. If
they
if
do
they
a
pull
lot
it
of
off.
they do a lot of experimentation too. So we'll see how. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever done this, but like if you go into your Netflix app, you can turn on a beta like feature setting.
Oh, and they'll give you all the stuff
And
that
like
they're.
you'll get access basically to like app features that before they're public, and some of them have shown up. Like I've seen them, I'm like, oh, this is cool. It'll be like clips, I think, was something they were testing for a little
Yeah,
while.
I remember you telling me about
And then
that.
it just went away, and they never released it. So I guess they decided like, oh, people don't like it.
I wonder if that
So
way, if like playing stuff at like 1.5 speed was that way, was in the beta as well.
it was probably. I mean, I'm sure they tested to some extent, but that's
But
a public.
yeah, it
That's a
seems like
public
this.
feature now, right?
Oh yeah, it sounds like N Plus is just like it's gonna happen, and they're
Right,
kind of
right.
just market testing. It sounds like there's just been too much R&D in the back end
Yeah.
for it not to happen. But yeah, it seems kind of weird. But I feel like the more you think about it, the less weird it is. I don't know.
Yeah, the I mean, the branding or like you said, I think it may have been leaked, so this probably isn't like the official announcement.
No, it's
What
definitely
it
not the
is
official announcement.
has not been communicated clearly yet, so we'll see.
No. So maybe it'll be like N times and multiplied.
How are you feeling about Netflix these days?
I haven't spent much time on it, to be honest.
Same. I feel like we're back now, and you know what? It's a new dawn for Stream Theory.
Season 2 of Stream Theory.
Yeah, and we're not Netflix shills anymore.
No.
I have not really watched anything on there that I've found that compelling for
The
quite a while.
last thing I watched on Netflix was Lucifer for research purposes because it was not enjoyable. And yeah, I don't go there to like hang out anymore.
I'll go check. I'll be like, oh, what's on Netflix? Is there anything new? And I'll like look through, and everything just looks like, not great.
Yeah. Sometimes people will ask me if I'm watching this like Netflix show, and then they tell me what it is, and it's kind of pulpy, or it doesn't seem like that interesting, and that seems to be like what they're going for right now, which I'm sure keeps the lights on.
Yeah. I think they stepped into this really interesting niche that I don't think, in a sense, they're kind of helping invent. But like, there will be. It used to be, you could tell a prestige TV show, and by prestige TV, like there was a certain quality of writing that you could kind of expect almost on the basis of the production values of the show. Mm-hmm. Like you could tell like this is a show that had budget, and there was like people were paying extra attention to like the cinematography or whatever. And you could look at it and kind of see like, ooh, this is really well lit. This is really well shot. There was money spent on this. It's probably well written. It's one of these like there's a lot of effort going into it. And more recently, I've noticed like I'll start watching something and I'll be like, oh, this looks really good. Like it's very slick production values, like looks great, the camera movements, but the writing level is like not prestige TV level. It's like it's not bad, but it's more like it's just a little pulpier, soapier kind of cliches type stuff. And I'm not saying I don't really have a problem with this. I just think it's an interesting development.
Yeah, prestige is like a loaded word because it implies
it's
greatness, but it's more of a style than anything else. Like you were kind of getting at it.
Well, a lot of it had to do with kind of budget and this attempt at like something more cinematic put to television,
or something grittier, more something that was like pushing the bounds of what we'd seen on TV before. It was like pioneered by a bunch of shows like The Sopranos or Breaking Bad after that, or
and it was almost exclusively those shows that got this like special treatment in terms of like the stylistic attention.
They had definitely a shared visual language, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's evolved, and now you can have, and I think some of it has to do with technology. Like you can shoot, the cameras that shoot really nice 4K are a lot cheaper, and lights have gotten a lot cheaper in the last few years. So like,
Yeah.
I've noticed this in movies to some extent too, where there's more stuff that looks great now, but is like not good in terms of writing.
But then you see something that like really pops, like visually, and you're like,
Yes.
oh, like
Yeah.
I'm watching Underground Railroad on Amazon.
Yes. Oh, I was just gonna bring that up as an example.
And it's like this isn't even in the same ballpark.
Yes.
Like this is just so much prettier. Well, I mean, pretty is maybe not the word I want to use to describe Underground Railroad, but the images are striking.
Yeah. Very much so. So yeah, Netflix is on the way out.
Yeah. We're selling all our Netflix stock.
We're selling our Netflix stock, and it's the most expensive. I just noticed it's like $18 now or something.
What's Amazon at?
Amazon's only like 13 or 12 or something like that. I don't know. And you get the I don't know
how much stock I own.
Yeah. Well, Amazon, I mean, they have one or two pieces. I feel like Amazon's whole thing is they have one or two pieces that are like good, like here and there. You have like the Underground Railroad is pretty good.
I feel like they're doing much more seizing the cultural narrative than Netflix is.
At
like,
the moment, yeah. Well, they had I think they were more successful this year in terms of films. Like The Sound of Metal did really well.
True.
Netflix, My Octopus Teacher won something, I think.
I've heard of that. I've heard of it.
So
I've heard of it in the context that it might win an Oscar.
Yes,
That's the only context I've heard of it. But I'm thinking about how, just in general, not with the Underground Railroad, but the week-to-week structure of Amazon has really been helping it and Disney Plus. Disney Plus obviously has been killing it with the Star Wars and the MCU shows, but in terms of popularity. But Amazon's doing it with Invincible, which was really popular, the animated series, and before that, The Boys did the same thing, where it was building momentum week to week. So I don't know. We'll see.
Really, the issue here is Netflix isn't doing any superhero stuff. So,
well, that's not true because they just launched that. They just put out a new. Wow, I'm just stumbling over my words. A new series about superheroes that's based off of like some comic. They bought like
The
a
Umbrella
comic line.
Academy.
No.
Something because I'm pretty sure that's a comic too.
It sure is. Jupiter's Legacy.
Jupiter's Legacy.
Which is a show. Okay, hold on. Let me get my facts.
Okay,
straight.
so they have superhero stuff, but it's not the stuff that anybody's talking about.
This is actually kind of interesting because it's from Mark Miller, who's a comic book writer, and I believe they like bought his like comic book franchise, so they're producing that, and then every time he creates something that they want to like film, they just have like automatic rights to it.
Interesting.
Something like that. It's upon release, Jupiter's Legacy was met with negative reception from television critics. So it's not doing great. And I believe Mark Miller is like known for being, not super great.
Not great.
If you're a comic book fan, let me know if I'm wrong, but I haven't heard great things. So yeah, we'll keep our eye on all of the streaming war stuff as we go forward. I don't know how much if this is going to be like the main focus of the show going forward, or if we're going to be more I think freeform.
I mean, what I've been thinking, and I'm sure it'll develop as we go, for people who have listened to Stream Theory in the past but haven't heard like the conversations we've been doing on YouTube. Which, by the way, if you're listening to this in the feed, you can now watch the Stream Theory stuff on YouTube, and we'll put links at streamtheorypodcast.com.
Don't look at me.
Whatever our website is. Maybe I'll put a thing at the beginning telling people. But there will be links on the website to where you can watch the YouTube version. but I mean, I think we'll do kind of what we did before, but it's just a little less structured and a little more casual.
Yeah.
That's kind
Which
of
I've
what
been
I'm
enjoying
imagining.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can watch all of our talks about the nature of television and
It lets
movies.
Yes. It lets us put things out a little bit more freely, I think, because it doesn't take up so much time editing and stuff like that. And yeah, so.
Yeah. I don't know why I said that so loudly. Do you want to start talking about Twin Peaks?
Yes. Let's. So, Twin Peaks is what we're really here to talk about.
That's right.
And
we got a little sidetracked, but we're here.
I think I think we can talk about it for a while, probably without spoiling anything, and then we can probably drop a spoiler warning at some point. So, if for some reason you haven't watched Twin Peaks and you want to listen to us talk about it, you'll be safe for a little while.
Honestly,
this
it
is
might
one of
be
those
unspoilable.
shows. Yeah, this is one of those shows that really it's not. It doesn't.
The plot is pretty inconsequential.
If you're coming into this with the mindset of oh boy, there's going to be some plot twists that I don't want spoiled, then you're probably approaching it not the way you want to.
I mean, I'm not telling you how to watch TV. I'm just telling you that's not how it was made.
I'm not telling you how to watch TV. There are just some attitudes that you can have when you're watching something that may increase or decrease your enjoyment of it. So
I was explaining to my friend who has not seen Twin Peaks. I was telling him that I was watching The Return, and he was like, I don't know what that's about. And I was like, well, let me explain it to you. And I explained it to him, and he was like, I had known a little bit about Twin Peaks beforehand, and now I feel like I know less.
Yes, yeah. So specifically, we're going to be talking about Twin Peaks: The Return, or the first 8 episodes of Twin Peaks.
The first half. I've seen the first half.
First
8 episodes.
Twin Peaks: The Return. So Twin Peaks was a weird show that was on. Excuse me. Twin Peaks was a weird show that was on TV in, what was it, the
1991 to 1992, and then the film came out in 93, I believe.
Yeah.
If I could just do, I can do this part.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So Twin Peaks is an early 90s show from Mark Frost and David Lynch. Takes place in 1989. Stars Kyle MacLachlan and a bunch of people who would kind of become famous later. Heather Graham is in it at one point. Actually, I take that back. Most people who are in the show are not super famous. Some of them are. I mean, they've all kept working, but Kyle MacLachlan's the main guy. It takes place. It's a bunch of people investigating an FBI agent who comes to Twin Peaks, Washington, to investigate the murder of Laura Palmer, who is the quintessential dead girl who motivates the entire show. And the show ran for 2 seasons, about 30 episodes in all. 8 episode first season, and then 20-something episode second season. It's a really famous show in TV circles. It was groundbreaking. It was kind of like the first real cult TV show in terms of something. Maybe Doctor Who was the first real cult show, but it was this show that garnered this really devoted audience that even though it wasn't widely watched, and people have been speculating about it ever since it was on, and a lot of shows have been influenced by its it looked like nothing else that was on TV at the time. A lot of shows have been influenced by it in a number of ways. Some of the more famous ones are like the dream sequences in The Sopranos are very Twin Peaks influenced. Lost in general is very Twin Peaks influenced. And so it's a very influential show. It's a show that if you are like a real TV nerd like me, you are familiar with, even if you haven't seen it yet, which was what had happened to me. So I was like, I got to watch Twin Peaks. And I watched first season and a half, and then there's this part in the second season, if you're familiar with the show, where they kind of, I don't know, just meander around for like 8 episodes.
It goes off the rails for a little bit.
Because of network notes and stuff, they wanted to solve the crime, the central Laura Palmer murder, and David Lynch had never, and Mark Frost had never intended to solve this murder, but then the network was like, you got to solve it. So they solved it, and then there were like 10 more episodes to fill, and it's clear that they had no idea what they were doing at all. And they kind of just, I couldn't even tell you what happens, what those episodes are about.
I don't remember any of it.
And then it like winds up again at the end of the season, and then it ends on this crazy cliffhanger. And then there's a prequel movie, and then there's radio silence for 25 years until Twin Peaks: The Return comes back. It's like 18 or 19 episodes on Showtime in 2017.
Yeah.
That's a pretty comprehensive review.
That does it. If anyone's not aware, some extra context is that David Lynch is prior to doing Twin Peaks, is a big filmmaker and makes a lot of very like kind of avant-garde, strange films. Like a lot of his movies are much weirder than Twin Peaks are. And so it was this interesting case. I'm not aware of other situations. Now there's a lot of crossover where like a director will come over from movies and do TV. It was more rare back then, and it was especially rare for someone who made stuff that was kind of on the fringes of even mainstream. It was like borderline art house stuff. And now he's coming in and doing like a network television show.
I would say he was like the most famous, well-known, well-respected, like the most well-known avant-garde like experimental
He's the most like
filmmaker.
Mainstream sort of. Yeah, like
not
art
to
house
indicate that he's mainstream at all, but
right.
He was most well-known by mainstream audiences.
So I think like for me the original run of the series is entertaining, and it's influential in the TV spheres within this realm of TV for all the reasons that Jackson has already mentioned. But like, I was also very fascinated by like someone who obviously has tendencies towards a much stranger mode of like storytelling, being constrained into working on like within the confines of like a network television show. And I think that was a lot of sort of the beauty of this show, was you had this thing that mostly appeared to be like a normal TV show, but then there would be these moments where like it would just sort of bubble through, and it would just kind of become insane in ways that were unexpected. I hate to say this because it's so cliche, but it's a vibe. Like, yes, it's campy too. It's like, yeah.
There's really not like any other way to put it. It's much more about the experience of watching the show than anything else.
So that
So that brings us to the conversation.
That brings us to The Return, which. So like that all that context going into in 2017, The Return comes onto the scene on Showtime, and it is much stranger than the original run of the show.
like orders of magnitude stranger. You can tell that there were some like strange things that David Lynch wanted to do in the original run, but either he was confined by TV, like you were saying, the constraints of TV, or he was being given notes by the network, or who knows. And when he signed up to do it on Showtime, I bet they were just like, I bet one of his things was like, I'm gonna do it my way and no other way.
There were battles, so it was like, because I was following it very intensely, because I was my wife and I were big fans of the original run, and had like watched at least the first season. I don't think I've watched the second season twice, but we had watched the first season twice, and
nor should you watch.
And we did that, and like, nobody should watch the second season multiple times.
First half of second season's great.
Yeah. Just when it gets boring, just stop or go back to the beginning. But that was in like, we watched it, I think, in like 2014 or 2015. And around that time, right after we finished it, there started to be rumors that there was going to be a third season. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. But then it was like about to happen and then it wasn't happening. And at one point, David Lynch had basically just put Showtime on ice and been like, "Oh, I'm not doing it. They're not giving me." He like publicly said like, "They're just not giving me the money I need to do it properly." And some time passed, and then it was like, "Oh, it's on again." So he apparently got the money that he wanted, which he obviously needed for whatever he's doing in this
He's
show.
clearly spending money on this show. I remember when this show came out in 2017, and I was following television. Like this is probably like the beginning of me being like a critic, TV critic, and obviously the television world, having been massively influenced by Twin Peaks, is talking about it and is really into it. And I'm like, I haven't finished the original show, and I've like tried, and I'm just like never gonna get caught up in time. So I never did, but I remember people talking about how different this was. I remember it being like number one on a bunch of TV critics lists of like end of the year, like best shows of 2017, or maybe it was 2018 by the time it was on lists. I don't know. Anyways, that's not important. But the important thing is like this made a huge critical splash. Everyone who watched it loved it, as far as I can tell. And
Everyone who didn't love it just gave up and didn't.
yeah, it's not I want to say it's not an easy hang, but I don't know. I really enjoy watching it. I enjoy watching it more than the original series.
I like it a lot, especially I'm especially enjoying it on the second watch where I kind of know what to expect. Like I don't have expectations for where the plot's going or like certain things being resolved or you know, showing up, and that makes it a lot more enjoyable because you can just kind of like go along for the ride, which you very much have to do. Because if the first one was kind of like a network television show with the sort of campy, weird elements to it, the third season is like probably the premier work of like surrealist TV. Like I can't think of that many.
Anything, yeah.
I can't think of that many examples, much less anything that would be better than this. But it's like it's slow.
There's some like aspects of certain shows that are surreal, like I think about like Atlanta, or which, funnily enough, Donald Glover pitched as Twin Peaks with rappers,
right?
And or like some sequences in like Mr. Robot are kind of like this, but nothing at this scale. No, there's nothing like this.
So like, okay, so talk to me about like.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to know what I just want to know
just
what
blanket,
you like.
blanket reaction.
What do you think?
All right, I wrote down some notes, but
we can go up to episode 8, and then we can talk about episode 8 separately.
Yeah, sure. Episode 8 is, if you guys don't know, like the weirdest episode up to that point, for sure.
Maybe the weirdest. Well, I don't want to say the weirdest episode of television ever made.
It certainly might be. It's certainly in the conversation.
It's in competition.
I don't know what. Anyways, so I watched the original series, and one of the reasons I had trouble finishing it was because it's very slow and methodical in its pacing, and I got really tired when I would watch it. And this is something I've talked about that my friends have also told me, is it's just like, it's a sleepy kind of show. The original run, and there's a lot of different stuff going on that's not all that, I don't want to say it's not interesting, but I didn't find it all that interesting.
In the pilot, just to illustrate this, in the pilot there's a motif of like a shot where you just watch a traffic light like change from like green to red, and it like reoccurs, I think, a couple times in the pilot, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's just like, that's the kind of thing that you're dealing with here. It's just like,
right. But I think also there's like a very weird cadence to the dialogue. And if you're not invested in what they're talking about, or like those characters, it can be really off-putting, kind of. I'm thinking specifically, there was like a season 2 like plot about like corporate espionage. I don't really know what it was about. Josie was involved, and the people Josie worked for were involved. And, I honestly couldn't tell you what was going on there. I literally watched scenes of that, and I was like, I don't have any clue what is going on, and these people are talking really weird.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about The Return is that it kind of cuts out all of the stuff that you're not that interested in. And it's really just about the most surreal, the most interesting visually parts of the original. There's still the aspects of like small townness, which I think was like was a really important theme in the original, and
exploring these characters that are like not, they're unusual characters, weird characters that wouldn't normally crop up in a lot of television shows.
Certainly not in like a crime, like a murder mystery. Like there's the woman with the log who speaks to people through her log, and that is like something that might exist in like a wacky sitcom, but not in a show that's about investigating the murder of a young girl.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the Return is like faster paced. I actually think that it might be slower paced, and the episodes are even longer, but it doesn't feel as exhausting to me because, first of all, every image is way more interesting. It's just like visually way more rich. The sound is way more rich. Just like everything about the production value is just way more interesting to experience with your senses. And I don't know, everything is just like more interesting, more vibrant. The cast feels bigger, the world feels bigger. They're moving around different locations. And it feels like while it's taking its time, it feels more purposeful, which is a thing that feels weird for me to say because I'm always like, you don't need to have an end point in mind when you make TV, but it feels less like it feels like it's meandering towards something rather than just meandering aimlessly.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Lynch's,
my basic basic takeaway.
I think one of the things that Lynch does really effectively is like creating a mood. And I think he had more freedom in a sense with this to do the things that, like, to just be able to construct a mood and just sort of like let you like be in, like in the first episode of The Return, there's this whole sequence where up in a building, in like this anonymous building somewhere in New York City, there's just this room with a bunch of
loved that scene.
And in the room there's a big glass box, and there's a hole that comes in through the side of the building into the glass box, and surrounding the glass box there's a bunch of cameras, and
like
there's
dozens of cameras.
Yeah, a whole bunch of cameras, and then there's like a couch with a lamp and like across from the glass box, and there's just a guy whose job it is to like sit there and watch this glass box, and then occasionally like swap out a memory card or a battery on the cameras or whatever. And then there's like a security guard, and there's this girl who is bringing him coffee, but she can't come into the room. And a lot of time is spent just like setting up that scenario, like very like intentionally. And it kind of just like builds into this suspense piece across the entire episode. And it's awesome. It's like very well constructed.
It's something that I'm not sure I would have appreciated in the original show, because I'm not sure it would have looked as interesting or been as like carefully constructed as it was. I think little things like the higher quality of cameras that they're using is like, or maybe they shot Twin Peaks originally on film, but like
they shot at least the pilot on film. But I mean, once it gets to TV, it
gets like down res or I don't know, whatever. The quality of the footage is just like lower than whatever I'm watching. It looks just so much crisper, and it like that kind of like I don't know. It makes everything feel more intentional. It makes me like focus on all the little details. I'm like spending more time just like, and I think the fact that it's weirder and that there is no plot to follow or very little,
Very vague
Yeah.
sense of plot. Yeah.
I think that is even better for because there's nothing to distract you from.
Yeah.
All you can do is sit there in the scenes.
Yeah.
As opposed to the original show where you're also still trying to solve this murder or like trying to figure out what the plot is and like what's going on.
Yeah.
And this was something I liked about the movie as well, Fire Walk with Me, which came out in '93. But that is much like there's not a ton of plot going on. It's really just like you know what's going to happen. It's all just focusing on the mood, focusing on the like palpable emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wrote down some stuff. There's a lot of stuff in this season that is just like really unsettling.
Yes.
And so I just wrote down a few that I already talked about. One, just the whole setup of that box and that whole sequence in the first episode, which by the way, this plays into something else that I wanted to mention, which is like the way the show is constructed across episodes, I think is very unique. Not many shows take the kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but like, for example, that whole sequence involving the room and the box is a big part of episode 1. But then like in terms of plot, it doesn't even come up again until like episode 6
Yeah.
or 3 or 4, or like many episodes later. And so it's like a huge chunk of episode 1 is built around this like little detail that then just comes up, and I don't remember if it even comes up again later in the show, but it isn't mentioned again for episodes. And there's a lot of stuff like that where you'll just like drop in with a character and there's this little detail, there's this little scene of something happening. Like I think you see like, Doc getting his shovels in like episode 1 maybe, or episode 2. And then you don't see what he's doing with those shovels for another like 2 episodes. There's these little like tiny snippets that are spread across long periods of time. In a way that's, I think, really unique.
I feel like those scenes though are, especially like the glass box scene, is just so good at creating this sense of like foreboding and not to spoil anything, but when something does happen in the box, that is something that sticks with you and is in the back of your mind as you watch the next couple episodes. So when you do come back to it, you're like, oh, this again. As opposed to it's like that emotion that triggers rather than any kind of this is the next part of that plot, which is like a much more common thing in TV.
Yeah.
Like he's much more about like building these he's building plot lines, but they're much more about they're much more based off of tone and switching between tones and vibes than narratives.
Yeah. And there's narrative pieces there, but a lot of it you kind of have to piece together.
Hit me with some of these weird
Okay,
moments.
so the box, Laura Palmer's mom, I forget her name, watching lions like tear apart a caribou in her living room.
That was so weird.
On television. It's so it's very unsettling. Hawks walking through the woods with like just a flashlight. It's just there wasn't much about it. It's just the way the scene is constructed visually. It's just very like, it's just part of that. It's like that mood is there's that episode where they arrest the guy and then they find like a piece of flesh underneath the cooler in the back of his car. Mm-hmm. And it's just like something about the way that's constructed. And it's just this reveal of like this little piece of flesh. It's just very like, I don't know. It makes you feel not good.
Yeah. Everything that happens in the Black Lodge, just the way that it's constructed is so interesting. Like every time, like all the way that the sound is built, the way that they clearly have like blocked everything backwards and they're playing the film in reverse, and you're getting like almost real. Like you're getting like it almost looks right, but it's not quite right.
Yeah.
And they talk the same way. That's something that I find just endlessly fascinating.
There's one scene. I think it's one of the first times you see the Gotta Light guy, where they're in the. I forget when it's happening, but they go to the morgue where they have Briggs before you find out it's Briggs. So I guess this is spoiler territory.
I mean, I'm not convinced. I don't know that it is yet.
Yeah.
It's unclear.
But there's a body in the morgue, and a lady from the FBI goes to check it out, and she like walks out she looks at the body, and then she like walks out into the hallway to
go
make
take
a phone call.
Yeah.
And while she's on the phone, you can just see over her shoulder, there's like far down the hallway, there's just like a figure, sort of like.
I'm not even sure it's the Gotta Light guy or if it is.
It's
a different one of them.
it's one of the.
Yeah.
It's maybe not him exactly, but it's one of the It's one of his underlings.
Maybe
It is. Well, I guess I can't say this for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's one of the same guys that like revives Bad Coop before in episode 8. There's a lot of like they have sort of the same, and which are the same guys who are walking around in the gas station when everything's like spazzing out. So
I guess
it's a
we're
weird
starting
show.
to talk about it.
It's a weird show. There's a lot of weird stuff. You drop in with characters that you know from the first 2 seasons. Like, you know, you revisit some of them. And there are some kind of plot lines you vaguely pick back up on. So, like, Cooper, big spoiler territory now. Cooper, at the end of
Season 2, he gets kind of lost into the lodge. Or does he? I don't even remember how it ends exactly. Okay, so I recently watched this, so I can just like quick. He goes into the Black Lodge to chase after Wyndham Earl, who's a late edition character in season 2, because he's kidnapped Annie, who's played by Heather Graham, and he's like chasing him in there. And he goes in there, and Wyndham Earl dies, and maybe Annie dies. I'm not really sure on the details there. And Coop comes back out, and then he like looks in the mirror after he gets out, and you see that it's he's being possessed by Bob,
yes.
who is the central villain. He's not good.
Yeah.
He's definitely bad, but I don't know if he's and that's how the show ends.
Yeah. And so at the start of 3, you kind of have the scenario where like there's a bad Coop. Presumably that's like the Bob infected Cooper walking around on Earth doing bad stuff. And then there's a Cooper who is stuck in the Black Lodge. And so there's kind of some story going on with that. You check back in at the sheriff's department, and Hawk gets a message from the log lady. So they're kind of looking back into the Laura Palmer case for the first time in like ages. We check in with some people at the R&R. We see Bobby again. Bobby is a
cop now.
A cop now. We also see who's the other guy? What's his name? We see him at the bar briefly. He has his head's shaved.
The motorcycle guy.
James.
Yeah.
We see James. So you touch back in with these characters, but
Shelley.
You see Shelley. You see Doc is a character, and there's a few more coming that we haven't seen yet. But that's like kind of that's like not the majority of the show. No. Those are kind of like little moments interspersed with like a new broader plot that kind of largely centers around the FBI and
Coop. The Coop mystery, how he's different now, how he disappeared, what happened to him.
Yeah.
Good Coop coming back and becoming
a
Dougie Jones.
Dougie Jones. Yeah,
Maybe. I don't know. It's unclear like what's going on there. I'm sure there will be more info. I don't know. I'm not sure.
All of that is very weird. And then you get to episode 8.
Oh, one thing I do want to touch on before we go.
Okay.
Before we move on to episode 8 is Michael Cera shows up. And in one of the episodes, he is the son of what's her name? This is like the worst podcast about Twin Peaks. We can't remember anybody's name, but it's not super important. The receptionist at the police station, and Andy, maybe Andy.
Yes, Andy.
It's unclear if it's ever Andy's kid, but he's definitely raised him. And Michael Cera shows up, and he's doing like a Marlon Brando like impression, I guess, and he gives like this speech that is legitimately like 3 minutes long.
Yeah.
About the road and finding yourself on the road, and Sheriff Truman, not the Sheriff Truman we know, but his brother, played by, I can't remember the actor's name. Ed. He recently died. Ed Forrester, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're correct.
Yeah, who's doing excellent. He just like takes the entire speech and is just like, well, okay, and he just like walks away, and then I don't think we're ever gonna see Michael Cera again.
Yeah, no.
The scene is.
I don't think you ever do. It's funny.
I googled Michael Cera Twin Peaks, and that's the only thing that came up.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's. I don't think there's another. Certainly not one that resonated with people as much as that one.
It's been really fun to rewatch because I watched it when it originally ran, and that was 4 years ago. It was 6 years ago if you count 2020 as the appropriate number of years. So, but like, it's amazing to me how much of this show I've just like when Michael Cera pops up on screen, I had completely forgotten that he even like was in this show at all. And so I got the same amount of like surprise.
He's like on a different show.
I don't know if
they
out
like
of nowhere.
That was the weirdest. I just laughed the entire time he was talking.
Yeah, it's really so it's a surreal show. It's kind of horrifying, but it's also funny. Like there's stuff like that that's like
very funny,
very clearly just like meant to be comedic in a very like sort of campy like So
when the brother of the guy who owns the lodge calls him and is like, "I don't know where I am."
Yes,
I'm high.
Yeah.
I'm high.
Jerry is really into
I'm really high. And then
just,
he just
like,
hangs up, and that's like the end of the scene.
Oh,
that was great too. Yeah.
There's
so we're having a great time. We're having a fun time, and then episode 8 rolls around, and I don't know, less fun. Definitely a different vibe.
Episode. If you had to describe the plot of episode 8, I think technically what's happening is the birth of Bob.
Sure.
But do you want to try to describe what that looks like?
I'll try to describe what happens in episode 8. I can't remember how it starts, but in my brain, it starts with
Bad Coop and another guy bust out of jail.
Okay, so that is this episode.
That's the beginning.
Bad Coop gets shot.
Yeah.
To death. And then then the guy who shot him drives away, and then a bunch of spirits, they kind of strike me as like coal miners.
Yeah.
Show up, spirits, and they kind of like revive him, and then we flash back to 1945, and an atomic bomb goes off, and then some really trippy 2001 A Space Odyssey end of the credits thing happens, which I was pretty into, at least for a while. And then we end up in this room And there's the giant there and a character we've never seen before, and they're also watching the explosion, the
Yes.
trippiness.
You
And-
fly. You fly into the mushroom cloud, and then you.
Oh yeah,
zoom-
you're in the mushroom cloud for
You
a
zoom
while.
down to what seems like a molecular level, and there's just like chaos happening on screen for a long time, like
For a long time.
minutes. It's just like very avant-garde, experimental, like just like
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
flashing lights, and but then there's this like alien creature that like pukes out what I believe, this is a fun little tidbit from season 1. There's like the corn substance.
Okay.
There's like some kind of theme with like that corn stuff. Somebody holds it in their
Okay.
hands at some point. I think it's foggy, but
If you say
I just
so.
know there's a connection there. So they
Okay.
puke out this substance. In that substance is Bob, and
Yes.
then you go to this weird room that's in some other world, and yeah, they're watching like Bob being puked out by an alien.
And there's more crazy stuff that happens in there. There's some like gold orbs. Some stuff gets like Bob or something gets like morphed into an orb and then like sent to Earth in like a little baby egg by the giant who's now floating.
Which I believe is
something.
it's the same giant up in this room is the same is like a giant that like makes an appearance in
to Coop sometimes in his dreams.
Coop sometimes in his dreams in like 25 years ago in the first original
Yeah.
series.
One of the things I love about The Return is at the end of season 2, Laura Palmer goes, "I'll see you in 25 years." And then
Yes.
it just happened. I guess it just happened to work out. I don't know if they were
It was like very
if they were
yeah.
planning that.
The
knowing
timing just
how
worked
David
out
Lynch,
from what I understand.
knowing how David Lynch works, I doubt it was planned. And yeah, there's then there's like more. You kind of see the creation of these like coal miner ghosts.
Yeah, yeah.
There's like a gas station that gets like blown up, kind of. And they're there, and some stuff happens.
There's
and
a lot of like really like he does a couple sequences in this show. There's one a few episodes before this one where he'll take what looks like a scene that was shot where like just action will happen, but then it's edited almost in this like record skipping type of effect.
Yeah.
Where like the characters will like move forward a little bit and then like
It's very
snap
jarring.
back, and it's on there for a long time. It's pretty like it's
Yeah.
it's a lot to watch.
It's a lot. And then he's back. I think it's like the 50s, the coal miners or
It jumps
something.
forward a little bit from whenever the explosion
and then
happened.
there's like it's like the same town or something, and there's a young girl who's been on a date with like this young boy, and they're like going back to their house, and there's a family, and they're driving, and then they run into the coal miners, and they're very freaked out, and then they drive on.
There's
and
also the nastiest looking bug, frog,
yes,
beetle
not quite,
creature.
not yet. I'm getting there.
Well, I think it lands around the same, or does it? Maybe it comes later.
Yeah, I was thinking.
It lands from somewhere around the same time that the coal miners start.
Yeah, it starts and it like comes out of this like egg thing. I
Yeah.
don't know. This is all in black and white also.
Yes.
Yes. And it starts like crawling around, and it's gross, and it's kind of looks like something out of like a Miyazaki movie, to be honest. It's got like
if
frog
Miyazaki
legs.
made like a horror
Yeah.
creature.
And then we're at this like radio station, and there's the guy doing like the radio broadcast, and then this one of the coal miner guys walks in, and he's just looks like Abraham Lincoln, and he's just saying "got a light" over and over again in
Yeah.
the most gravelly voice I've ever heard.
Over the radio, and like meanwhile like cracking.
Oh yeah, he's just killing people.
He's just like cracking people's heads open.
kills the
with his hand.
receptionist. He's like and just with his bare hands, he's just like cracking it.
Yeah.
And he's putting everyone to sleep with this chant. And then the
Something about the horse and the white of the eyes, and that's all I remember. He says it a bunch of times though.
yeah, he says it a bunch. it was stuck in my head for like a day, and now I'm worried that it's like burrowed deep in
Right,
there, and
yeah,
it's gonna
yeah.
like it's gonna like
Sometimes
trigger when
25
someone
years
does
from now, you're
something.
gonna have
Yeah.
a dream of
And then the bug thing crawls into the young girl's mouth, and
yes.
I believe that's the end.
Yeah, that's the end of the episode. That moment is one of the most disturbing things I think I've ever witnessed on television.
The bug into
Just
the
the
mouth.
bug crawling into the girl's mouth. Yes.
Yeah, it's something else.
So like, how did you feel about this? Like,
How did I feel? I felt
did you get something out of it, or you're just like, this is a weird, like, it's kind of weird that this was actually, part of the show.
yes.
I don't know. Just I don't know.
Yes to both. I felt I definitely felt something. I'm not usually someone who can like sit through like long I mean I can do it, but like I don't like sitting through like long surreal montages of ambient whatever.
Yes.
I feel you ever go to I don't know if you're this kind of person, but I certainly am. When I go to a museum and I'm there for like more than 45 minutes, I get really tired from like looking at all. It's like a thing. It's called museum fatigue. There's a Wikipedia article. Look it up. But I get the same way when I watch like really experimental art, like we had to watch in film school, and I didn't feel that way when I was watching this.
Yeah.
At least not until like it had been going on for a very long time. Right. At some point I was like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot.
It's the majority of the episode, so it's a legitimate like 40-minute sequence of just like pretty bizarre.
Yeah. And I would say for the first 30 minutes I was like, I'm really into this.
Yeah.
And then the last like 15 minutes I was like, I'm into this.
You start to get a little fatigued.
So there was that, but there's definitely like a bit of I don't know what I'm watching, but it was definitely, I don't know, it definitely hit me. I definitely felt something. I don't know what happened, but I would say that it's weird because I think Bob as a character there's something about him that doesn't seem like it should be that scary. Like if you watch the original series, like nothing about that show is like horror to me.
Right.
But every once in a while he would show up and he's at the foot of the bed, and that spooked me the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
Or any of the stuff from Walk with Fire Walk with Me. Fire Walk with Me, he's terrifying in. And this captured the same like terror dread that those moments would hit me with. Even though he's like kind of he seems like he should be like this cartoonish villain where he's like, and he's like walking around like this, and he's in all denim, he's got long hair, and he kind of seems like a caricature. But sometimes they just like tap into this like deeper terror level that like elevates him. And I felt like this episode was all that feeling.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think is like incredible to be able to accomplish that. Like to tap into something so that I thought was like just a me thing, just a uniquely
Right.
how I felt about him, but for them to just like really identify that tone, that emotion, and then play it out in a totally different setting with totally new characters and no dialogue, and like you see Bob's face once, but the whole thing is I feel like it's the Bob episode.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe that's the point.
No, I mean, I think that's that's your experience of it, and that's a very valid, and it is about Bob's origin, I think. Like, the plot, I'm skeptical of people putting too much of a, like,
mythology on it,
but there is some discernible plot, like, and reasoning behind some of that stuff, and I haven't, like, done all the research to look into, like, what it all means, but, like, within the mythos of the show, like, Bob is essentially unleashed during, like, something about nuclear testing, creates some kind of rift that
Which is,
unleashes Bob, and so he's basically like an evil energy or spirit that comes in from some rift in the universe or something. So it
or
is
just
about
like
that.
this like step in human evolution that we've taken this like
Right.
dark turn where
Yes,
we've created
yeah.
this bomb that is so you see this in like some media where it's like almost like the atomic bomb is like this unleashing of some primordial evil.
Yeah.
Like that's what Godzilla is kind of, and
Yeah.
and some other stuff, and Bob is very much in that vein, but there's something about him that's like more personal. I don't know. I've never been the kind of person who's been like freaked out by like slasher movies. Like some people get really freaked. Like there's like the two kinds of horror movies. There's the slasher movie and like the more like supernatural occult stuff,
Yeah.
or like ghost stuff. And a lot of people think that the supernatural stuff is not as scary because it's easier to be like that's not real, and they're more freaked out by like the home invader,
Right.
because that's real to them. And I've always been in the other camp where I think that the stuff that I cannot understand is just way scarier. And Bob feels like he should be more of that home invader, but he's like a mix of the two.
Yes.
And I don't know, they're able to touch into both, and it's very spooky.
Yeah. I really like the way the third season kind of takes like the first two seasons they take this this kind of typical cop show narrative of like, oh, it's a murder mystery, and they sprinkle in this sort of like esoteric, like, metaphysical storyline in there where it's like, oh, there's evil stuff is happening, and then it at first it's just kind of in there as a suggestion, and then it becomes more explicit when you find out that like Bob in Leland Palmer is what killed Laura Palmer, and so
Right.
technically this like thing did it. But then it takes that and expands it out in season 3 to this like this like world proportion in a way that's like doesn't lose focus of sort of the immediacy, and the individual characters, but makes it feel more
All encompassing.
yeah, it doesn't do that weird thing where it's like sometimes when a conflict becomes like global or like super significant, you're like, it feels like, ooh, it's convenient that this small town just happened to be the place where, the world was being saved or lost or whatever.
It's like in Buffy how there's like, I don't know if you've ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but she lives in Sunnydale, and Sunnydale is quote unquote the Hellmouth, which is the gate between
Yes.
hell and earth.
Yeah.
So it's like all this crazy stuff happens here, but that's because it's the Hellmouth, and that's what life's like living on the Hellmouth. And
Somehow
think
this doesn't feel like that.
No.
It doesn't feel convenient. It feels more like it's symbolic of the like the extraordinary struggle against like the extent of the evil that is being struggled against in this small town, in a way.
one thing that sorry.
No, that's all.
One thing. So I think I think you touched on something that's really interesting about the original series is very much, it's kind of about like evil lurking beneath the surface of these rural small towns, that might seem like quaint and nice or whatever. And I think you can read what happens to Leland as kind of like the dark underbelly of small town America. And I think and that definitely is something that seems to be continuing in the third season. We're going all over the place, but we're still very much in small towns, right? We're in South Dakota, or we're in Vegas, but it feels like suburban Vegas or something.
Yeah,
like
it's like the part of
neighborhoods
Vegas that
in.
people actually live in.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there are other places too that I'm forgetting, but we're kind of all over the place in these small places. And that's something I think he's still interested in exploring, but it almost feels like he's saying that it's more like human nature. It's more primordial. It has nothing to do with maybe these small towns are a place that we can see it for some reason or another, and maybe we'll get into that.
Right.
But it's almost like it exists everywhere, and it has been unleashed, and
there's allusions to a connection between like that evil and larger, like there's just like several. I forget how it pans out, but like in the first 8 episodes, there's just several scenes of like this guy in a business, an office in a skyscraper somewhere.
Yeah.
With zero context.
The
You have
guy
no
who's
idea.
he's like a big David Lynch guy, right?
Yeah,
he's in a bunch of David Lynch movies.
He's been in a yeah, and you have
remember
like
his name.
no idea what it has to do with anything. But
Well, he does pull out some kind of folder, right? And the folder he gives to someone, and you know that he's into some bad juju.
Yes.
And then they give that folder to a dwarf, of like a little person,
and then
and
he
he like
goes-
stabs the person to death, or he kills like everybody
he's going and he almost tries to kill Dougie.
after he's killed a bunch of other people.
Yes.
So there is some connection there.
Right,
I don't know what it is yet, but I don't. He certainly takes his time connecting things.
Yes, connecting the dots.
But
Yeah.
I feel like in a lesser show or something that was, I don't want to say lesser show. I feel like so often these like stuff that gets played out where they connect the dots over such long stretches of time would be easy to forget. But I feel like it all comes back to that same, like, each one of these plot lines, each one of these narratives is less driven by a singular story that you have to follow all the details of, and more of it almost like changes gears in the emotion that you're feeling.
Yeah,
So it's like, okay, when we go back to this storyline, we're going to make you feel what that story was again, and you're going to experience whatever happens. But it's more about the continuation of that tone, and then we switch to this other tone, and you're feeling that tone. And I wonder if once we get further along, if we're going to start to see these kind of mix. I mean, but that kind of feels like the way that would make all these stories connect in the end. But I don't know.
It continues to be a wild ride. I think episode 8 is kind of the peak, but it in terms of like visually being jarring and sort of experimental, but
It was
as a narrative, it continues to be a wild ride. So we'll talk about it. I think again once you've finished.
I would love that.
And I'm gonna look forward to doing that. I think part of what I loved so much when I was watching it the first time was at a certain point, it was like after I watched episode 8, I had this realization of like, oh, this might be what I'm feeling now. Might be a little bit of what people were feeling when they watched the original run of the show. And because it's like Mark Frost and David Lynch were pushing the boundaries of what like you could feasibly do on a television show back then. And for people who were watching it at that time, they wouldn't have had the context. Like you were just watching a show that's on television, and it would have been really bizarre to suddenly have this like dream sequences where giants are showing up and like all this crazy stuff is happening. You would have been like, this is very weird. But like
we've seen so many of its descendants now.
We've seen so many of its descendants that you and I watching it for the first time in like 2015 or 2020 or whatever, it's like, oh, this is cool, this is weird, this is whatever, but we can't experience what it would have been like to see that show in the context of nothing like this has been made before. And I feel like watching Twin Peaks: The Return very much had this feeling of like, this has not been done, like, at least in a mainstream way, this has not been done on television, like, and this is pushing the boundaries of what you can conceivably do with the medium in terms of like stretching at the edges of what people will tolerate. That's just, I don't know. I think as TV people, I'm as someone who's into the medium, I'm interested in that on its own. But it ends up also being
it is kind of like a emotional time capsule. Like, I mean, we're doing a little bit of like extrapolating here. Like, we think this is what they felt like, but I mean, it is hard to be like, it's hard to go from like I grew up, one of the shows that really got me into TV was Lost, and to go in from like some of the craziness of Lost, which is obviously influenced incredibly by Twin Peaks, but is also in 2004, 2006, 8, 10, and then to go back to Twin Peaks and it's like, oh, this is kind of cute. Yeah. And then Twin Peaks: The Return is like, oh, no. This is we can still do it. It's just now it's almost like time has caught up, or audiences or technology or culture or whatever has caught up to where David Lynch wanted to be.
Right.
When he made it the first time.
Yeah. Oddly,
or maybe he's evolved. I don't know.
I don't think The Return has been influential in the way that the original run was. But maybe it's too soon to tell. I mean, it only came out in 2017, so 4 years ago. So it might still be like too early.
I will say that a lot of creators that I've read in interviews with or whatever have talked very glowingly about it.
Yeah.
I know Sam Esmail thinks that it's like the greatest thing ever. He's made a bunch of. He started to make like more shows after that, and I know he's got his Battlestar Galactica reboot coming up. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe we'll see it more. I don't know if anyone can do exactly what he's doing.
No, probably not.
In a way, it is less accessible than the original run, because the original run did have like more of a structure. Like, I don't want to say this doesn't have a structure.
There's a lot of people who want a plot.
Yeah.
Like,
I think we talked about this with the Sopranos and The Wire a while back. It's easier to do a B+ version of The Sopranos than a B+ version of The Wire. Like, right. you can kind of, because it's more accessible. Like, I get it, an anti-hero, and there's like this plot. Whereas if you wanted to like half-ass The Wire, you can't do it. It doesn't work at all.
It falls apart.
Because you have to do so many different things. And in a similar way, I feel like it would be a lot easier to do a similar show to the original Twin Peaks. But I feel like if you tried to do Twin Peaks: The Return and fell short, it would really fall short.
Yeah.
So,
under the Underground Railroad is kind of pushing. I don't know that it's necessarily influenced at all by the show, but similarly, like kind of pushing at the edges of at least introducing some of these more surrealistic elements in storytelling that I think there's a lot of episodes of that show that at least that I've seen so far that are the focus is much more about mood and sort of this like evocative feeling or sense.
I don't want to I'm like hesitant. I've only seen 2, and I'm hesitant to compare it to a show that is on its face. But I'm hesitant to make this comparison. But it does kind of remind me of a higher quality, a more surreal version of Lovecraft Country, in that it is using these kinds of surrealist ideas and horror themes to explore something that was very real and historic, and apply it to historical fiction. I don't want to make that comparison. Like, I don't know, just because
I haven't seen Lovecraft Country, so
just because they're both
but I don't know. I can see the connection where there could.
I don't want to reduce them to that comparison. Is what I should say.
Right.
But I do see some similarities, and I feel like the Underground Railroad is doing it better.
I'm really liking the Underground Railroad, so maybe we can
that first episode was tough watch.
The first episode is a doozy.
Punishing is the word I would use.
I've watched up to episode 6, and none of them are quite as grueling as watching.
The second one I enjoyed a lot more.
Yeah, but it definitely
it definitely is dark, but not as punishing.
And then the episode, I think it's like 5, called Tennessee Exodus, is not as graphic as the first episode, but the whole episode is just like this long, you just pull down a violin,
oh jeez,
it's like that. The mood, his sound design is I think I've never watched a show with sound design like this show has. The way he'll just like envelop you in this like really just horrifying like yeah, it just really the show really gets its fingers into you in a
All right,
in a really
I will
interesting
keep
way.
watching.
But, yeah, maybe we
I will
talk
keep
about that.
Yeah,
another
maybe next time.
time. I guess are you gonna try to
propaganda
figure out what Twin Peaks
Okay,
is
so the
saying about
reason-
the police?
One of the reasons I got back into, if you follow my channel, you know that I've been doing this series on propaganda, which is about the police portrayal on TV and how it shapes our understanding of who the police are and what they should be.
Which is
That's
definitely
my-
worth watching.
It's my elevator pitch.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I got back into Twin Peaks after having stalled out on season 2 several years ago, in the part that sucks, was that I wanted to revisit it for this because, my next episode is about spooky cops. And there is perhaps no spookier a cop than Agent Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
I think that there is stuff to say about the first 2 seasons. I don't think that there is anything to be not gleaned, but it's just it's so dreamlike. It is so much of a Rorschach test of symbols and stuff that I haven't really seen any police work really in season 2. There's been a little bit.
There's
but,
you could maybe have some like there's maybe some commentary about like the FBI.
I will definitely touch on it.
So.
But it is not going to be like a full episode.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there is a whole lot to be said.
Yeah.
It's almost like one of those things that you don't want to analyze it too much because that's not what it's for.
No.
It's for pure vibe, tone, emotion, whatever you want to say.
It's to experience and feel, and you kind of take away from it what you do, and like there's not much. I mean, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning before we were recording. There's people who have like theories about what's happening in Twin Peaks and season 3 and kind of like a Westworld, like put the pieces together sort of way. And it's like, there's definitely some clues and some plot that you can perhaps assemble and like discover things. And there's like a novel that Mark Frost wrote that has additional backstory and other stuff like that. So you can kind of like, but to create like a unified theory of Twin Peaks is to a little bit miss the point just because of how like
Strange
David
it
Lynch
is.
famously, if you believe him about the way that he works, he's not really thinking about a lot of those things as he makes stuff. So
it's not
any
clear how much
meaning
he's
that's-
thinking about anything.
any meaning that's there to be garnered is in interpretation. Like it's
Right.
not, he's not setting out to create a commentary on anything. He's just coming
I do
up
think
with
that that's
ideas.
valuable. I do think it's valuable to think through. I think there is some value to be gained from, even though this was an instinctual creation,
Right.
he didn't think about it. This is a manifestation of his subconscious. I think there is definitely something to be learned from, hey, what is in his subconscious about society? But I'm not sure how accessible it is to us other than this kind of almost like primal connection.
Yeah.
That once I start writing it, we'll see. We'll see.
I did. It's been so long since I watched the first 2 seasons, so maybe my comparisons are off. But I feel like there's an increased skepticism of like the FBI, and maybe we can maybe this is better to talk about after we once we finish the show. But so there's a cliffhanger. Maybe we'll talk about how the FBI is portrayed or whatever. But like my sense is that the return is a bit more skeptical of just kind of everything. Maybe maybe David Lynch just got older, but we'll talk more about that.
All right.
Next time. We should. We've been recording for almost 2 hours now.
Yeah, I think so.
We'll let you guys get back to your lives, and
Yeah, sounds good.
where can people find you on Twitter or the internet?
People can find me on YouTube at Skip Intro and on Twitter at Skip Intro YT.
And I'm Thomas Flight on YouTube and Twitter. And if you want to listen, if you want to subscribe to the RSS or the podcast version of this, the links are in the description. And if you're listening to this, you can go to streamtheorypodcast.com and see the YouTube version.
And you can subscribe to the YouTube channel that this is on as well.
Yeah.
It's Thomas Flight B-Sides.
Yeah, I don't know what the URL for that is.
Well, if you're watching it on YouTube,
if you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe to that. Yeah. Cool.
All right, awesome. Bye.